Welcome back to Heartshift TV. I'm Marcy Newman, your host, and today I have this incredible guest, Jared Bull. And Jared's story is one that is going to leave you, I think, awestruck. And awestruck in a very good way, a way that you begin to recognize that the expansiveness of our consciousness, the awareness in which we live our lives, is filled with incredible potential. Mm-hmm. In fact, unlimited possibilities. Mm-hmm. And so, without further ado, I just want to introduce this gorgeous young man to you.
Oh, thanks, Marcy.
And to really just welcome you to this place. Mm. And I know that there is no time, that there is no space, and we've experienced this in some of our connections.
Yes.
However, I want you to know that I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Marcy. It means a lot to be here. I'm excited.
Thank you so very much.
Absolutely.
So, Jared, the story that I've been promising them that we're going to tell today didn't really begin so long ago for you.
No.
Right? You're 27 years old.
Yeah, it's taken off quick. It's taken off real quick.
So, what I would like to share with our audience is a little bit about your background, okay? But what really started this incredible journey that you're on now?
Yeah. So, I joined the military when I was 18 years old, and I was very patriotic. I wanted to serve the country. The 9/11 event, really, it hit me hard. I remember watching that. I was in 6th grade, and I was watching it on TV, and I just cried. And it was the first time that I felt like my heart just went really deeply out to something. And I made a commitment to myself in that moment to say, you know what, whoever did this, I'm going to find out, and like there needs to be some sense of justice, right? So
retribution.
Retribution, yes. So that was like the shift that happened within me then. And so that followed me. I kind of forgot about that for a little bit, but then right around when I was 17, that started coming back, and then that was when I joined the military, and I joined the Marine Corps, and I went into the infantry. I was a machine gunner. So there was
my jaw just drops every time I hear that.
Yeah. And so
that's intense, Jared. Come on.
Yeah, it was incredibly intense. And now, being older, even though I'm only 27, looking back at it, though, I'm thinking, how can you be allowed to sign your life away when you're 18, but you're not allowed to have some alcohol yet?
Right.
You know, so where that something within the social structure there isn't right, I think. But so I joined the Marine Corps, and then I ended up in Afghanistan a year and a half later. After that, and that was when everything really just started happening. It was a very intense deployment. We had a 50% casualty rate, so 1 out of every 2 guys in my company was either shot some way or they hit an IED, which is a bomb.
Were you aware of that when you were shipped over to Afghanistan?
We had been briefed on the AO that we were going to, the area of operation, and the whole area there was very, very kinetic. We knew it was going to be very violent. No Americans had been there yet. It was a part of the country that had been untapped.
Oh my Lord.
And not only that, Afghanistan produces 80% of the world's opium, and that center that we went into was actually the core opium producer. So that was what funds, the black market, terrorism around the world.
A lot of livelihood.
A lot of livelihood, exactly. So that land was
a lot of risk.
Yes, they were defending it with their lives.
Of course.
And so that's what happened. It was a big battle. HBO did a documentary on it. So it was a highly publicized event back in 2010. And then when I came back from that, I just had so many questions about life, about being human, about being in the military, what it means to be alive, because I was faced with so much death and confrontation. So really, in terms of like awakening and waking up to the world, waking up to who I am as a spiritual being, I think that was the start of it. Being faced with physical death, you really start to question your spiritual life.
Sure, absolutely. So I know that you've had a number of experiences during that deployment that, as you said, really became the impetus, right, for your spiritual growth.
Yes.
But I also know that you, during that time, and I'm emphasizing this because we all have these experiences. That's just who we are. We evolve. It's part of our journey. But often we have these very pivotal points in our lives where there is something that's being called for.
Yes.
Or called from us.
Yes.
That we've never experienced before. And often there's trauma that is associated with that. So I know that you had an experience of this nature.
Absolutely.
And would you be comfortable in sharing that with our audience?
I would love to. Yeah. So my first month there, I got called in for kind of like a mission. We were set up in a building. In the first 5 months there was no bases built. We were living out of our backpacks. We were getting food and water shipped to us at night because the helicopters wouldn't land
during the
day because they would come under fire. And a helicopter is a lot of money. So yeah, so we were totally in. The enemy was 360 degrees.
I got the nuance.
Okay, good. You got I think you get the picture.
Yeah.
Here. And so the night fell, and I was seeing some people out in the field, and I was up on a roof, and they were at our position at the last spot that we were at. So one of the things that you do in the military, right before the sun sets, you move. Or no, I'm sorry, right after the sun sets, you move your position. So if the enemy's watching you, they see you at a position, then the sun sets, and then you move. So then they'll go to that position to attack, and you won't be there.
Okay.
And then you'll be off to the side, and you can say, "Oh, I got him." You know.
Okay.
So it's like a defense.
Cat and mouse game.
Cat and mouse game, exactly. It's all about cat and mouse
Okay.
over there. Absolutely. And so I was up on the roof, and I saw some people, and it looked like they were putting in an IED right on the road that I was in. And they were digging holes, and then there were helicopters flying by, just random security patrols, and it looked like they were always hiding whenever the helicopters came around. So I called it down to my platoon commander, and I said, "Hey, I got some 2 weird guys over here. They're doing some fishy stuff. You want to come up and check it out?" And so he came up on the post, and I was a machine gunner, so I had my machine gun with me, and he cleared it to take them out. We viewed them as a threat. We thought they were a threat. We passed it up the chain of command. The chain of command said, "Hey, we got enough evidence here to assume liability, so we're going to take it." So I took the shot, and I ended up killing one person and wounding the other. Come to find out, after every engagement you do what's called a BDA. It's a battle damage assessment, and you go over and you send a team or a squad to check in on the damage that was done. And so when we did the BDA after the shooting, we found out that it was a kid, and it was just he was farming at night, and that he was with his brother. And so the mother came out, she was crying, she was screaming, and I didn't really feel in that moment, I didn't really feel any of the emotion of it, what I had done. I just knew that I was doing my job, I was doing my duty, I was protecting my buddies.
So completely disconnected.
Completely disconnected, right.
The event.
Totally, 100%. And so I just said, well, that's war. You got to go on. Casualty. Yeah, casualties of war. You got to move on. So, I moved on and went throughout the deployment, and, further on the deployment, there was a lot more, war, a lot more battles, a lot more similar situations. But that memory stuck within me, but it went to a very, very deep place, because you're conditioned to stuff your emotions away. You have to.
You can't survive otherwise.
Exactly. You totally have to dehumanize yourself in order to take the life of another human. That's the price you pay. So it wasn't until I got back from that where I started really thinking about what I had done, and I started questioning our mission in Afghanistan. I started questioning what America's doing over in the world, and that really that was what started the unraveling process and really started leading me back deeper into my purpose.
So when you say unraveling, describe the unraveling.
So first it was I felt these emotions coming up, a lot of sadness and a lot of depression, and I didn't know why, and I was still in the military when this was happening.
Wow.
Yeah, this all started coming in right when I got back from my second deployment to Afghanistan. I didn't want to go back to Afghanistan at the time, but I was with my buddies, and camaraderie. You wouldn't leave or abandon them even for your own ideals, right? So I did the second deployment, But when I got back, I was ready to be done. I started getting very anxious all the time, no matter where I went. I started getting depressed. I wasn't motivated to live. I started drinking on a daily basis. All those self-coping mechanisms.
Sure.
And then that's when I realized, okay, something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. What's going on? And I had a lot of questions about what it means to be, a patriot, what it means to go to war for your country. And I didn't really start answering those until I got out of the military. But the biggest thing was just dealing with the repression to get through that event.
So what else did you experience? Essentially what you're describing is real deep trauma, obviously,
absolutely.
that you have repressed and in a very deep place. But for our listeners who maybe have not experienced trauma, or perhaps you have experienced trauma and don't recognize the threat of the symptoms.
Yeah.
If you could elaborate
Absolutely.
on that, because I think we have an opportunity here to let people know that when you're experiencing these severe symptoms, these forms of separation, right? It's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that came up was lack of sleep, insomnia.
Sure.
I couldn't sleep at night because all that stuff was trying to push forward into my awareness.
Sure.
And so, you can't rest, you can't relax because you have all this tension, this cognitive dissonance. That's the psychological term for this condition. When you're doing something on the external world and your internal value system doesn't believe in or agree, it creates a disconnect.
Sure. You're out of integrity.
Absolutely.
With the self.
Yes, out of integrity of the self, and that creates that tension. And so no matter what I was doing, it was always tense. I wasn't sleeping at night. And then the lack of energy came, so I wasn't really, there wasn't a set schedule. It was like, well, if I can sleep tonight, then I'll sleep, but if not, I'll just sleep until noon or 1 p.m. And so there was really no organization to my life. I just felt totally out of tune with myself and with the external world. And so that's the first big thing, is the insomnia. Then after that, I started getting like panic attacks, like anxiety. I would get flashbacks. I would be back there, because part of my consciousness, it was such a traumatic event that I believe what happens in those traumatic events is your consciousness gets frozen there. It gets stuck, and then your physical being continues to move on in linear time and has new experiences. But, your consciousness is always going back to that event. And I think that's why, and I hear it from veteran spouses a lot all the time too. They say, sometimes my husband, he's just not there.
Right.
He's like not all there. I don't know where he goes. And that's because part of his consciousness is still stuck back in that original trauma, in that moment. And it's calling back. It says, hey, you left me back here. You got to come back and get me.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually look at that as unmetabolized emotion. So just like if we eat something, for instance, that doesn't agree with us, our body immediately goes into, not attack, but it wants to remedy the situation, because its whole purpose is to break food down in order for use, right? In order to fuel. So if you have emotion that's not metabolized, it can't be used as fuel for what we would say the spirit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's spot on. Yeah, because I think in order to get to the deeper spiritual body, you first have to go through the emotional body.
Of course.
There's those layers. So how are you going to get in touch with your spiritual self if your emotional self is still all over the map? In chaos, right? Right. Yeah. So that was really the big event that really just had me question everything, and then made me realize, okay, I need to investigate all of this. I need to investigate it from the social view, but also I need to learn the internal world. What's going on with my inner world? So
I think that's an incredible awareness, not just because of your age. I mean, maybe in particular because of your age.
Thanks.
But also just to have the awareness that I've got to take a deeper look at what's happening, because I am spinning out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell people this all the time. Pain is the biggest motivator. I mean, it's not fun to feel, and a lot of times we try to run from it, we try to suppress it with addictions. But pain, if you listen to it, it's trying to tell you something.
Sure.
So I just advise your community, any of your viewers, just to listen to the pain that's in your life, whether it's mental pain, physical pain, or emotional pain, because it's trying to tell you something. And when you go into that, as scary and crazy it might feel, once you get on the other side, you come out with more wisdom, more clarity, and just more wholeness.
It's always a call for love.
Yes, absolutely.
Always, 100%.
A love to the self.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
So tell me something. You reached this point. You said you were still in the military, which again is amazing, that you could kind of separate yourself from the duties that you had been asked to perform and what you were feeling in terms of the recognition that you were out of integrity with your own true nature. What happened? How did you start to
so that
make peace with that?
That was really hard because I was working against the social structure at the time, which says, hey, do your job, do your duty. It's your job, to the contract that you signed, the oath that you took, but also to the men, to your friends.
Right.
And so that was a really scary time for me, but I knew that I had to do something. I could no longer live with that internal pain, and I could no longer go in that self-destructive mode. So what I did was I actually wrote a letter to the chain of command explaining everything that was going on within me. I took about 2 days to gather my thoughts, organize it, sat down and wrote and said, I got to give this to these guys so they can hear this, because a lot of men, even in the military, are still going through the same thing, but they don't know how to communicate it, and they think they're just going to be locked away or shut up.
Right.
And so what they do...
Or ostracized.
Or ostracized, exactly.
And that's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly when you're in a system that is based on that camaraderie that you spoke of earlier.
Yep, because then you're the outcast.
Yeah.
No one wants to be the outcast.
No.
We're social communal beings.
And you have to know that each other has each other's back.
Right, exactly, yeah. So that was the biggest thing for me. I was like, I don't know how to come out with this, so I wrote a letter to my chain of command explaining everything.
Very brave of you.
Oh, thanks. It was very scary, but you know what? I saw other guys wanting to do the same thing, but they weren't doing that. They were self-destructing. They were going out to the bar, getting in fights, getting DUIs, coming back onto base. Going to the strip club, getting in trouble,
digging deeper
into that hole, instead of actually, I got a lot of crap here. How can I organize it? And I'm taking a long shot, but that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
And so I wrote to the chain of command, and I was very surprised, but the chain of command was understanding of it.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it was beautiful. They heard me. They set me up with a psychologist, military psychologist. And they kind of put me on the back burner a little bit because they realized I was just kind of burnt out at the time. And
maybe they were a little fearful too of you being on that edge.
Absolutely.
I'm sure they've dealt with that before.
I absolutely. And it was really good because when I came out and told them about that, one of my platoon sergeants at the time said, hey man, I've been in that same space before actually. I'm glad you came out. And he really helped me get through that time. So if anybody... if any of your viewers are watching this, or maybe, a military spouse who has a husband who's in this situation, encourage them to come out. You might feel like you're working against the social system, but you'd be surprised. There's individuals within the system who are willing to help you out. So I think that's really important. Take the courage, even though it's scary, be courageous and say, follow that inner truth, because it will work out in your highest benefit. I think the universe tests us, and it puts us in these interesting situations where it says, we're going to kind of make it look like all the odds are stacked up against you, but if you really trust me and you choose that path that's really hard, you'll see that it's all there waiting for you. And that's been the pattern in my life since
And it's the only way to get to the other side.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you stay stuck in the pattern like a dog chasing its tail.
Absolutely.
Around and around and around.
Yeah.
And what also many spouses may not realize is that you may have symptomology that seems to disappear, but when you're talking about this deep trauma, it's there, and it will demand recognition because it's always seeking to be released. So it might change form, right?
Yes.
It might come across in a completely different way. You might think that, your spouse is beyond it, and then all of a sudden there'll be another trigger.
Yeah. Yep.
All of a sudden something will put them over the edge, and it will shock you. It'll take you by total surprise. But when we really understand what's happening, and it's all the need of all of our systems to purge themselves
Yes.
of these toxic residues,
Yes.
then we begin to recognize that it's essential to get whatever you need, whatever we need, regardless of the circumstance, to make certain that that release takes place.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched up on that, because I think that's a huge thing for any veteran wives to understand, but any family members or husbands or friends, family, just to children, yeah, even kids, because we don't. The military will train the individual, but they won't train the families.
Of course
right?
not.
You can't. That's not their job. It's outside their occupation. But when a guy gets home from war, or even from any traumatic situation, anyone, whether it's a man or a woman, and they have that energy locked in their being, and they don't know what to do with it, the family's just looking back and saying, what are you doing? And then that person even kind of feels a little crazy. I always felt, I had one about 3 years back when I was really still coming out of it. I had one situation where my mom came up to me, and she came up to me in my sleep, and I literally socked her in the jaw. And it wasn't hard, because right at the last second I saw who it was.
Oh my God.
But it kind of went like that, and I cried. Immediately after I did it, I just cried, because it wasn't me. It was just that reaction, that energy that was still locked in my body. And she was so nice and loving. She was totally understanding of it. She was just so great. But that was really, that's something that families need to understand, is this energy from war or trauma. It's locked in the body, and it's going to play out in all these various ways and forms. And the best thing that you can do is just give that person who's ever been through that trauma an open space to just freely express what's coming up. You don't even need to try to fix them. You don't need to try to say, hey, do this, do that. All you have to say is, hey, look, I can't understand what's going on with you, but I'm here. It's safe. You have a safe, open space, and you can communicate to me whatever you feel you need to, and I'm not going to react to it.
I imagine that's quite a bit of a tightrope, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a lot of times, if the person who's experienced the trauma doesn't have an understanding of what's going on inside of them, and the reactions are violent, the reactions are extreme, then it also is the responsibility of those around them to make certain that they're not being that they're not maintaining an abusive situation.
Right.
So I think the point is also that treatment is always indicated.
Yes.
Across the board, treatment is always indicated when any of our loved ones have been in traumatic experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get help as soon as you can.
Yep.
Get help wherever you can, and do it as soon as you can. Because if you want to live a more fulfilling life, you have to be healed.
That's right.
Healed here.
Right.
And that whatever's within you is going to come out into the external environment. Eventually. Yeah. You just can't. There's no other way. That's just not how reality works. Yeah. And the more you can heal and go inside this internal world, then the more you can have a better external reality. For sure.
And of course, the longer that it's there, we have layers and layers and layers of muck that lays on top of it.
Yes.
Right? And it becomes a much more difficult excavation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that those are really, really wise words. So talk for a moment about the difference between, I think this is fascinating actually, the difference between how military men at one time were treated when they came back from war, as opposed to what happens now.
Yes.
And what that is causing in terms of compounding this trauma.
Yeah, so...
Fascinating. Listen.
Back in the World War I and II, we didn't even know what PTSD was. We didn't have a term for it. We gave it what was called shell-shocked. Guys would come back, their nervous systems, their whole bodies would be so hardwired with this energy of war. And the energy of war is chaos. So it would show up as people twitching. It would show up as people not being in control of their body, because literally the chaotic energy gets downloaded into you when you go to war and you're on the battlefield. Then you come home and it's just there. You
Right.
don't know how to release it. So in World War I and II, that's what we had. We had shell shocks, we had little terms, but it was really stigmatized. And so you have these older generations, the boomer generation and the one before that, they didn't come back to a society that said, hey, there's this thing called PTSD, you have to deal with this trauma. So that was like that's it. Just now, guys are starting to come forward from the World War II generation and Vietnam, saying, "Hey, I've been dealing for 35 years, and
Yes.
there was nothing in my external environment that was validating this inner experience that I was having." Now we're actually, the VA and just our society is making a lot of progress in terms of identifying PTSD. Now everyone knows, okay, when you get back,
This is real.
right? It's real. It's a real thing. It's affecting people. It's affecting families when they come home. So
Whole societies
whole
and
societies.
cultures.
Yes, absolutely. So they are getting better at recognizing it. Now the social structure still is behind in terms of fully dealing with it. And I'll give a good example of that. So now what you have veteran suicide is still an epidemic in this country.
So Jared, can we just back up for a second? I just wanted to make mention of the statistics of suicide for those baby boomers, as you mentioned, and those affected by World War II, Korean War, even Vietnam.
Yes.
So the difference being that, as you were saying, that PTSD was not something that was readily recognized. And so there are so many people, right, having been involved in those traumatic events that have never received treatment.
Yes.
And the suicide rate is skyrocketing.
Yes. So one of the biggest differences between the men and women coming home now as opposed to during that time is we're coming home and it's already integrated into culture. The concept of PTSD, the concept of trauma and what it does to the body. The baby boomer generation, some of the generation before them, when they got back from war, there was none of that. In fact, it was looked at as if you showed your emotions, if you came back from war and you were crying or something like this, then you should be locked away. You were crazy, or you were just pushed to the side. So,
not to mention even some of the animosity if you came into contact with those who were anti-war.
oh, absolutely.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
Totally. Oh, totally. And so a lot of those guys they just stuffed it away.
Sure.
They just stuffed it away. They stuffed it down their inner world because they had to. There was no external recognition. And whenever you don't get an external recognition, that energy just goes back into here
Sure.
and it creates pain. So now what we're having, though, is this cultural shift that's happened within the past 15 or 20 years where we're finally realizing, okay, we have words for it, PTSD, men are coming back from war, and there needs to be something into place. So now when you come home, there is a bit of a social structure that's set up that allows you to get help if you need it, and it's not something where you'll be ostracized for. But what that's doing to the older generations now is the older generations are finally having held on to that stuff for decades. All of a sudden they're like, whoa, wait, I'm having all this energy come up because the culture's allowing it to come up,
Right.
and they don't really know what to do with it.
Wow.
And so they don't necessarily know where to go. There might be some confusion. And so I think that's why, I know the statistics is 22 veterans a day are committing suicide.
I read the same.
That was in 2015.
That is incredible.
And a majority of those
What a great loss.
It is. It's horrible. After men and women have done what they've done and served the country, they need to be taken care of. And so that's a sign that there's something missing within our social structure
Right.
that isn't caring for the men and women who serve the country. And so that a majority of those suicides, though, are the older generation. And I think that's because that energy that they've had, what we would call as PTSD, has been locked down there for so long, and it's just hardened. And then finally it's allowing to come up and get released, but they don't really know what's happening, or they might not know about how to go and handle handle
Sure.
the energy and deal with it.
So war itself is ancient, right?
Yes.
So how, in the ancient days, let's say, did the warriors find the healing that they needed? Because let's face it, I mean, we're seeing the effects of trauma in our cultures and societies all around the world.
Absolutely.
And we are actually seeing that energy of PTSD on a level that we've never, ever had before.
Yes.
So what's happening? Well, where's it being generated from? But mostly, are there other ideas? Are there other ways that we can help either those warriors coming home or other people having had trauma? What can we do?
Absolutely. So before I get into answering the question about how the ancients dealt with it, I first want to give an understanding of how the social landscape has changed. So now we're living in the modern world. We have technology that's increasing the way humans function on a day-to-day basis.
And communicating.
Right. We're always connected to our phone.
Yeah.
We're connecting right now, So we're always connected. So the world, as it gets faster, we're going to have to learn to integrate our inner experience faster as well. And so that's the problem, is you have guys who are coming home from war and they get back from battle and they're in a whole nother battlefield now. Right? So whereas before you might have gone to war, you can come back and the world isn't moving as quickly. After World War II, the government had a Farmers Act where they helped veterans, start farms. That was awesome therapy. The veteran can just be alone,
It is awesome
work on a farm,
therapy.
work with animals. I mean, that's wonderful. That was such a great, great healing experience that the government afforded. But now we're coming back from, a war, which it's 24/7, right? We have night vision now.
Absolutely.
War is on. Before, in the older days, war was most of the time usually fought during the day and there was a break during the night. That wasn't always the case, but it was a majority of the times. Now you're always on. You're on for 7 months, or maybe your deployment's 14 months long, depending what service you're in, but you're always on. So your nervous system is hardwired to always be alert. So modern warfare has completely changed, and the modern landscape when you come home is completely changed. We're always on here. We always have our lights on. People are expected to work night shifts.
That's right.
So as a combat veteran, when you come back from war, your nervous system is already blown through the roof. You're charged to the max. And then you get home and you're surrounded by technology, by artificial lighting. It just adds insult to injury. And it's like, no matter where you go, it's hard to find a ground where you can just reset the nervous system, where you can just settle down and where you can just get into your body. And that's the problem, because a lot of guys, they get back and they don't know ever how to get back into the groove of things.
So even though there's this awareness of PTSD and there are support agencies, there still is not this opportunity for them to, as you said, come into their bodies and heal that nervous system that has been living essentially in that foxhole for month after month after month.
Right, absolutely. And I tell people, all the people that I work with trauma, I tell them that's the first thing you need to do is reset the nervous system. In trauma, your nervous system, the fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system, kicks through the roof and you just, okay, I got to defend myself. But after that, you need to learn to make it to come back down. But we haven't been trained to allow that system to reset itself. And a lot of the therapies that we're doing that are occurring at the VA or the traditional healthcare level aren't really working too much with the nervous system. Pharmacology, they give you a lot of pills.
Right.
They just numb you. Or numb you even further than you've already been numbed. Or they'll do simple talk therapy, which is good. That's definitely effective for a little bit. But, for guys who truly want to heal, like myself, you need more than that. You need alternative treatment, fascia therapy, acupuncture, yoga, meditation. You need those more comprehensive alternative therapies if you truly want to heal, not if you just want to slap a Band-Aid over it.
Right.
And that's what needs to be done. And our social structure is crying out for it right now. All the people, the statistics, 22 a day, it's showing you that the social structure is not working.
Right.
What the solutions that we have are not solutions. They might take you to a certain point, but guys want to heal. Guys want to be an integrative, contributive member of society, and you cannot do that until you reset the nervous system, until you have the proper treatment.
very powerful point.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very.
Yes.
So we have to reorient our entire approach to warriors coming home,
Absolutely.
as well as to other people who experience traumas. I mean, we really
Totally.
have to start to pay attention to what is necessary for true healing, and
Yes.
not just, sort of placating those symptoms.
Right. I think a lot of the times we kind of just have a check in the box, like, okay, well, you got out, now do you have your pills? Good, you got your pills. Okay, well, do you have at least a job? Okay, you got a job. Okay. And it's just kind of a check in the box, but you really got to show true care. When you're dealing with people who've been put in intense traumatic situations, they haven't been cared for. And the most healing thing that you can show them sometimes is just a true depth of care and
Sure.
love.
Sure.
And so I think that's the most important thing. But I did want to get back to your question about how the ancients dealt with it.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting. Do you mind if I go into that?
Please.
Okay. So what the ancients did, the ancients understood that war it's a natural part of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's dehumanizing, it's hard to deal with, and I do hope that one day, as a human species, we don't have to take part in it.
Right.
But for right now, it's a reality.
Yes.
And so we have to deal with the reality, and we have to have legitimate solutions to deal with that reality. The ancients, they knew that when a man gets home from war, his nervous system is shot through the roof, and he has all that chaotic energy within him. He can't relax. So they actually had whole temples set up where men could come and get treated and allow that energy. That's a charge. That's all it is. It's an energy charge that gets downloaded into the body when you're in battle. They had methods for you to allow to release that. And one of the ways they did it was interesting enough. They used sex. Sex, they had women priestesses who were trained how to take in that chaotic energy. Because what happens when we have sex is we merge with another person physically, but spiritually. So they would merge with that person who was really highly charged. That person would open up energetically, and that's another big thing with people who've been in trauma. They don't want to open up.
No,
because
they can't.
They can't. The world came at them.
They've
it
lost that
assaulted.
mechanism.
Right. They lost their trust.
Yeah.
They close off. Well, the only times they can open up is in sex, and this is why a lot of them have sex addiction problems.
That's
it's
right.
the only time that they're open. So what the ancients knew was they would bring their men home from war. They would lead them into the temples. The women priestesses were trained to merge with them, not in a lustful way, not about procreation, but about getting that energy out of them. Receiving, exactly, receiving. And so they would receive the energy, it would come in, and then it would go into the woman priestess's body, and then she knew how to ground it and let it out of the body. Transmute it, right.
That is amazing.
Right. And then the men went home to their wives and to their families, and there was no PTSD, there was no domestic abuse, there was none of this, I gotta self-cope with drugs or alcohol or sex. And look at society functioned wonderfully,
It's amazing how much we have to learn from ancient ways.
Oh my gosh,
right?
absolutely.
And so much of what we do in terms of healing is really to revert back, right? To reprogram what really does work, because we have gotten so far away from that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think there's this unconscious parallel that we draw within our minds in the modern world between technology and healing. I think we say the more technology we get, the better it is, and the more we can heal.
Yeah.
And we already have the technology. It's the human body.
We've been designed.
We've been designed.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've been designed. The human body is one of the most amazing pieces, gadgets on the world, in the universe that we know of right now. If you
perfectly designed.
Yes, and if you know how to use this the right way, then you can heal just like that. You don't need a bunch of expensive technology. You just need wisdom.
Right.
And so I think that's really the direction that we're heading in as a culture right now. The CAM therapies, complementary alternative medicine, is on the rise. 4 out of every 10 Americans use it.
That's right.
And that's the orientation for that entire field is around bringing the human being back into its natural setting.
Right.
And you don't need technology to do that. I'm not against technology. I'm not saying it doesn't work or it doesn't help, but you don't need it. We already have the technology. We need to learn how to use our bodies to heal to heal ourselves and heal each other.
And to be guided by our hearts.
Yes, yes. You always got to bring it back to the heart. The heart is the center.
Epicenter.
You're right.
Yeah,
It
the
is
epicenter of the healing.
Totally.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Getting back to your own personal experience, as you said, you started to develop this awareness while you were still in the military. We're very brave. I mean, that took real courage.
Thank you.
To
Yes.
write that letter to say, you know what, I don't feel good about this.
Yes.
I don't feel good about what I'm being asked to do any longer. And all the risk that was involved with that. But I also know that there was some residue yet that you needed to release from yourself of the experiences. So share with our audience some of the things that you did.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started researching what it means to be human. You know, okay, I'm being around life and death situations made me realize, well, is there something more than just this body?
Right.
So I started looking into, the yogic traditions of healing, Ayurveda. I started looking into Chinese ancient systems, herbology, acupuncture. And I was starting to see that what it means to be human is so much more than just a bundle of flesh, which we get taught through religion, but I didn't want to have a religious perspective. I wanted to have a spiritual perspective, but that was rooted in some type of scientific inquiry. And so that really brought me into the yogic understanding of how the human system works. The physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, the spiritual body. They already have all the systems mapped out. They call them the koshas. You have the Annamaya kosha, which is the food body or the physical body.
Yeah.
The Pranamaya kosha, which is the energy body. So during my healing, it was like I was working my way through all the bodies. I had a lot of physical symptoms and physical pains, so I used traditional healthcare to heal that. Talk therapy, certain types of healing modalities. What's the one? Just like kinesiology. Okay, I got my knees bummed out.
Yeah.
So that helped heal my physical body. But then I was like, my emotions are off. What's that about? So then I started getting deeper into that. So I started doing, EMDR. That was a big one. I started doing, what's the fascia work? Fascia work is huge. Fascia work, the fascia system that runs through the whole body from head to toe, it gets charged with that chaos,
Yes.
that energy. And fascia work just allows you to release that energy. And it's an alternative practice that the VA isn't using, but it needs to be used by the VA. I mean, the suicide rate would plummet down if we were using that. So I started working through all these bodies, and then eventually it brought me, I felt like I healed really well on the physical level, on the mental level, and on the emotional level. And then I got to the spiritual aspect of me, and I was like, well, or what the yogic tradition would call the pranamaya kosha, the energy body. And so I said, well, what's the treatment that's here for this? And that's how I came across shamanism. And that was the thing that really kind of took me to that next level. I think when it comes to healing, you first have to address the base. The base, you should work at the base. And then when you feel ready to get up into that higher realm, that cellular realm, then you can do that.
Yeah.
Because if you go straight to the cellular realm, then that you might start bringing down too much energy, and that can actually compound problems. But then I eventually got to shamanic work, and that was totally transformative. It changed my life. It aligned me with who I am on the inner world, and it just allows me to live to match my internal world with my external world. I don't feel much of a separation between the two anymore. But
which is amazing.
Thank you. Which I mean, that's pretty much, I feel like, the source of all pain and all suffering, is when you have an external world that doesn't match your internal world. It's hard. The two are hitting up against each other.
Of course, you're constantly in conflict.
You're constantly in conflict, right. But once you get to that space where you can resonate and it just flows, then you feel the universe flow through you. In the Chinese medical system, the human body is looked at as the microcosm to the macrocosm.
That's right.
So once you heal yourself internally and you align your internal world with your external world, that's where you can definitely be most happy and joyful and blissed out.
In truth, it actually aligns itself.
Yes, I agree. Because
once you align internally, externally must align with it.
Yes.
It's just the law of the universe. It's energetics.
Yes, I totally agree. And that can get a little scary too, because I was doing so much internal work, but I didn't realize that my external world had to shift.
Yeah.
And so once my external world shifted, I was like, whoa, this is happening a little too quickly.
Oh, I have to let that go.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to yeah, stop doing this, and just
Right.
be in that alignment.
Absolutely.
It is. It's a big step sometimes.
Absolutely.
So, in this shaman work that you're doing now, treating other people, I also know that you're bringing that to the masses through a wonderful organization that you've become a part of.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
I would love to. Yes, thank you so much. So I'm working with a nonprofit called Valors Mission, and one of the things that we're dedicated to doing is to picking up wherever the traditional healthcare system leaves off. And that's what needs to happen. Right now, the VA, they're doing the best that they can, but and like anything bureaucratic, it takes time,
Yes.
it takes money, and it takes organization and effort. A number of things that our government has trouble doing. But that's just the reality that we're living in. And it's up to us, the individuals, to start a grassroots movement to shift that.
That's right.
And so the VA, they are getting better. They're starting to offer some CAM therapies such as acupuncture and yoga, which is wonderful, and mindfulness meditation. But there are other therapies out there that can, in my own life, that have proved to be unbelievably beneficial, and that just took me to the next level of healing. You know, they didn't get pills. I think it's necessary to have medication at one point, but eventually you want to taper off them. And, you know, traditional healthcare, it helps to a certain point, but eventually you got to take it to the next level.
Sure.
And I know that this country and a lot of the veterans or anyone who's dealt with trauma out there really wants true healing.
Of course.
Who doesn't want true
Absolutely.
healing? Who doesn't want fulfillment? Every decision we make comes down to living a more happier, fulfilled life. You know, whether it's picking up the bottle of alcohol because we think that's going to make us happy, or whether it's, you know, doing the things that we really need to do, like getting the healing work. So the work that I'm doing with this organization now is we're trying to, well, not trying, we're getting a community together and starting up programs, alternative healthcare programs that can help veterans specifically who are dealing with trauma and who don't know how
Military veterans.
Military veterans, yes, who are dealing with trauma, who don't know how to heal, and who have gone to the VA, gone through the bureaucratic
Right.
process, and they can't do it anymore. And that's the other thing about it. Anything, when a guy or a woman gets home from war, they don't have time or energy to go through the bureaucratic process.
And nor do they have time to do all this investigative work.
Right.
Or the capacity to even
Yes,
do it.
yes.
They are still in chaos.
Exactly. And when you're still in chaos, how can you organize anything?
can't.
You can't.
No.
So that's where Valors Mission comes in. We're getting those alternative. We're building an awareness of those alternative therapies. We don't just want to work within the medical community, though. We also want to work with the academic community. How can we talk to researchers, colleges, and say, hey, these alternative therapies, they worked for me on the experiential level. How can we get research into it so you guys
Right.
can start promoting them and getting grant funding and getting projects funded and social projects funded? Yeah, that's where it starts.
Sure. And your organization is privately funded at this point, isn't it?
Yes, so it's a nonprofit, and we're just right now everyone's kind of just like putting their own dime and dollars
Sure.
in, like that, because that's how it
Heart.
starts
Yeah.
off, right? I'm putting my
souls.
own money into it. The founders are putting their own money into it. We're starting to get build some public awareness.
Yeah.
But this is what needs to happen. This is the shift that needs to occur in order for us as a country to heal,
Right.
as us as a species to heal and to come together.
Yeah. So now you're talking my language.
There you go. Yeah, we'll take it away from the patriotism of the country to universalism.
To universalism.
I totally agree.
And, my work is so much involved in teaching forgiveness, teaching people actually how to let go of whatever is no longer serving their highest good.
Yes.
But it's also the highest good of all.
Yes.
Because we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
And if I could just ask you a question, what do you think the role of forgiveness is in helping our veterans to heal?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. First of all, you have to forgive yourself. I think that's the most important thing. Because you've been asked, as a veteran, as a combat veteran going to war, you've been asked to dehumanize yourself.
That's right.
You've been asked to take the life of another, and that's extremely painful, whether you can recognize that within yourself or not. So the first thing you have to do is give yourself love. Forgive yourself. Realize that, okay, I grew up in a certain culture. I was trained a certain way. I did my job, I did my duty, I did it to the best of my ability, but now at the same time, I did have to compartmentalize my own humanity and kill my fellow brethren. And that's you know, they're humans, just like we are, trying to make it in life, have families. And so I think that's the first thing that you really have to do in the healing process. Admit, okay, you know, there was trauma, I did hurt another soul, but I did the best that I could, and I did only what I knew. Mm-hmm. And then that, when you can allow that, that'll allow your heart to expand, and you'll feel into your own humanity, and you'll realize that, okay, you know what, I just did the best that I could. It wasn't wrong, it's just what was demanded in that moment of life.
Right.
And now it's over, you know, and you don't have to hold that anymore. You can let it go, and you can release it. And I think that's the most important thing for men to do.
I think that's really a very deep place of healing, and I do believe it's essential. And absolutely. I guess my other question to you would be, do you think that all of these warriors, all of these veterans of war will ever forgive us for asking them to put their own humanity aside?
That's a great question. You know, I do see, and I saw this within myself when I got back, where I did have a lot of resentment for civilians, because I just said, oh, they don't get it, they're stupid, they don't understand. You know, that's a hard thing. You come back from a deployment in a war-torn country where you're sleeping in a foxhole for 7 months, and where you're killing people and taking lives, and you're seeing your buddies get chopped up.
And suddenly all the glory's gone.
Yeah, exactly. And you get home, and you hear someone complaining about their latte not being the right way. Mm-hmm. You just want to toss their latte across the coffee shop and kick them out, because it's like, you know, you're complaining about this. This is nothing.
Right.
So there is definitely a lot of bitterness and resentment there, I think, for a lot of veterans. But in my own life, I got to a point where I was able to self-love and self-accept myself for all the things that I had to do to survive. And when I got to that place of self-acceptance and self-love, I finally realized that wherever we are at in life is where we are. And you can't get around that. If you've never been to war, you just don't understand it. If you've only ever been in America and you've always had your latte made the right way, then you expect your latte to be made the right way. Right. And when it doesn't happen, naturally you're going to be upset. Yeah. So I had to create an internal shift within myself so I wouldn't become so resentful. I said, well, you know what? Everyone is just where they are, and that's okay. Yeah. And when I was able to accept that within myself, when I could accept within myself that, okay, I'm hurting, I did some you know, hard things in my life, but when I accepted myself and realized that I just did what I was put, you know, I just did what I had to do. Conditioned to do, trained to do. I didn't know any better. Right. And I allowed myself, you know, I gave myself that love and that acceptance. Then magically, it was like everyone on the external world didn't bother me anymore. Right. I just realized, no, that's just where they're at. Right. I'm where I'm at, and they're where they're at, and that's all it comes down to.
Sure.
So.
And I think my message to our audiences is that I think that we need to start really thinking about what we ask of others.
Yes.
And what that is an indication of within us. You know, for us to, dare I say, have the audacity to ask someone to defend us at all costs. At all costs, right?
Yes.
And it's almost as if my asking you to give your physical life is not the least of it.
Absolutely not.
Because the after effects of what I have asked, and I take it personally, you know, and each of us needs to. We need to begin to understand, because we're all in this together, that there is a response of a 17-year-old, right, who says, yes, I'm gonna go find justice for all of you. That can only come from the place where we have asked you to do that. Where we've created a world that would demand that.
Yes.
That we live in a world that is so stagnant on so many levels that we have not yet evolved out of that. And this is our responsibility. So it brings us back over and over and over again to the self.
Personal responsibility.
Personal responsibility. to make certain that all of those demons that you've dealt with, so beautifully, I might add,
Thank you.
are demons that each of us carries.
Absolutely.
We all have to do our work. And regardless of the traumas or level of trauma, we are carrying that density of energy that affects our reactions, our responses, the choices that we make, the actions that we take. And we affect everyone around us. And there's an incredible ripple effect to that.
Absolutely. Yes.
This has been such an incredible experience
Yes.
having you here today. I really am so honored, and I'm so grateful that you've done the inner work that you've done.
Thank you.
That brought you right here.
Yes.
Your
yes.
message is powerful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So speaking of that, how can people get a hold of you?
Yes, so the nonprofit that I'm working with is called Valors Mission. The website's valorsmission.org. You can donate there through that page. We also have a Facebook page that you can donate through. And then my own website is mysticeye.co. No it's just mysticeye.co. and you can contact me through there. That's where I do all my shamanic work.
Okay.
Teach yoga, meditation practices, all the things that I use to help heal myself that I want to bring back to the world.
And that
you can contact through there.
You are so walking your talk.
Thank you. Yes,
And
it feels
you have
like
so
it.
much to give. As I said before, your message is just so powerful.
Oh, thanks, Marcy. Thanks
So
for
thank you
having
so
me.
much for being here, and thank all of you for sharing your precious time with us. We can't begin to tell you what it means to us to know that this is as important to you as it is to us. And so, of course, I remain your Heartshift coach, and you can reach me at heartshiftcoach.com. And until next time, know that I'm sending you huge hugs and, of course, blessings for many heart shifts of your own. Thank you.